I'd like to welcome Jaco Saunderson, Head of Engineering at Vodafone, who is going to share his DevOps journey and what they've learned. Please, a round of applause for Jaco.
Am I on? Yes. Thank you for that. Let me just get my machine to work. Hey, it's very nice to be here. Thanks for the introduction. You make it sound as if we're finished with our DevOps journey and I'm now sharing what we've learned. We're not. We're right smack in the middle of it. And it's interesting, you know, some days we think we're doing really good stuff, you know, market leadings, thought leadings, awesome, and then other days we think we don't know what we're doing. And everybody must be way ahead of us because look at what we're struggling with. What I thought to do was, you know, share with you what we're up to, what are we doing, why are we doing it, what are we learning, what are the mistakes we're making, what are the good things we're doing, etc. It should be interesting, not because we think it's leading or, you know, best in the world, but because many organizations are in this same journey. Some ahead of us, some behind us, but I guess we're all in this journey together. And I don't think we will ever reach the end of the journey. And so it's always good to talk to other travelers. So my name is Jaco Saunderson. I'm Head of Engineering at Vodafone. I spent sort of half my career on the consulting side of IT or, you know, technology, and the other half on the corporate side. So Vodafone is an interesting animal, interesting beast, and I'm going to share with you some of what we're doing there. But just before we dive in, I want to share with you a few interesting facts about Vodafone, so you can get a sort of a feel for what we do. Click. So Vodafone has a number of business areas. One of them is business and others business customers. And what we do there is connectivity, mobile phones and plans, broadband, IoT. There was a lot of talk about IoT today. Roaming, unified comms. We have a contact center as a service capability that we make available to the market. Productivity tools, cybersecurity. We're also a wholesale business, of course, selling to, you know, virtual operators who don't own their own networks. And then from a consumer perspective, you probably see our ads. You would have seen that we are rebranding to One.NZ next year, early-ish next year. But we do what mobile telcos do. We have mobile and broadband and super Wi-Fi and rural broadband and all sorts of community initiatives, etc. A few interesting facts. So these were accurate. So don't quote me and get the Commerce Commission on my back. This was accurate in September 2021. Okay, that's the disclaimer. But we have or had 3 million connections. So it would be more now. 3 million connections. $44 million contributed to various charitable organizations in Aotearoa, New Zealand. 1,650 cell sites. We have, I'm not saying we have 98.5% geographic coverage. I'm saying 98.5% of people in New Zealand can access our mobile network. It was, and maybe still is, I don't know, the largest 5G network in the country. We have 70 retail stores and about 2,000 employees in New Zealand. There's 7 million mobile calls in a day, 20 million voice minutes in a day, etc. You can read those, it's quite interesting. 20 petabytes of mobile data per month, 170 petabytes of fixed data every month. It's a fair chunk. I mean, it's not an important slide, but it shows the timeline of innovation. So Vodafone, and many telcos, not just Vodafone, but Vodafone has a proud track record of innovation in the telco space. And so we were the first with many things, and I'm not going to read all of them off of there, but the first with rolling out many innovations in the telco space, and we hope to continue to do that for as long as we're in existence. An interesting thing, though, is that in 2019, Vodafone was sold by Vodafone Group. We belong to Vodafone Group, headquartered in the UK, to Brookfields and Infratel. And so we are now locally owned. We're still part of Vodafone Group as a partner. And then early next year, we're going to change our name. And it's not just the name that changes, it's the actual organization that changes. People are sometimes, you know, sort of a bit skeptical about what that means. Is it just a rebrand? It's a rebrand, but it's more than a rebrand. It is really reinventing who we are, what we do, what we mean, and what is the role we play in New Zealand. So Vodafone New Zealand or One New Zealand, it's very much about focusing on New Zealand as opposed to the rest of the world. And that's actually the starting point for our story today. I suppose the main driving force that's taking us into a new and different direction. All right, so what is our DevOps story? It is interesting that about a month, 2 months ago, I was in Copenhagen for the TMF, the Telemanagement Forum conference, big annual thing, and all the telcos in the world are there. It was very interesting to note what everyone else is doing, because we can sometimes be a little bit insulated here, and when you're in a place like that, it becomes interesting to see what all the others and all the big guys are doing, right? We're a small telco. There are some telcos with clients 200 and 300 million, large telcos. And it was very interesting to note that while some are big and some are small, some have lots of money, some not so much, different geographies, different various things, the one common thread that pervades through all of these telcos is the fact that there's a huge amount of transformation and change and disruption going on. And we are all struggling with coping with all of that change and working out how are we going to go forward. So our DevOps story really starts with 4 things happening at the same time. One is business transformation. By virtue of being sold and now having a quite different focus and a quite different mandate, quite different expectations, and the whole thing is quite different. But also because of the fact that, like all other telcos, we need to keep on reinventing ourselves in order to remain relevant in a field that changes all the time and quite fast. There is a huge amount of business transformation going on. So sort of 2 layers of business transformation that's hitting us at the same time. And then in addition to that, of course, technology transformation. Having been part of Vodafone Group, implied a certain investment profile for us. And there are many things that we now want to invest in with this new organization and with the new ownership. And what that drives is a tremendous amount of technology transformation, more than I've ever seen at any organization that I've been involved with in the past. So it's like 2 tsunamis coming our way, 2 tsunamis worth of change. And I joined Vodafone at a really good time, just when all of this was starting to happen and we needed to work out what are we going to do? How are we going to do all of this stuff? And so 2 of the mechanisms, 2 of the thoughts, 2 of the drivers that we said, look, without these things, we're not going to be able to deliver any of this stuff. It's lean and agile at scale, and I'm not going to talk about that today, and DevOps. Now, interestingly enough, at that conference that I referred to earlier, the TM Forum conference, there was there's one of the speakers had this it's like a little formula, it's written like a formula. It says, the future of telco equals DevOps plus APIs plus Star as a service, everything as a service, plus AI, right? And so it's not just us concluding that in order to deal with what's happening with us, we need to adopt DevOps. It's the rest of at least our industry, and I'm sure every industry. I can't think of an industry that will argue that it should not or it doesn't need, a DevOps capability. All right, so those are the drivers, and so we came up with a thing that we call Mai Tahi. It's Maori, it means working together as one. And there's a whole lot built into there, and I don't have even nearly enough time to talk about all of that. But basically the idea here is that we're going to create this initiative, this movement, this culture change, this process. It is informed by and driven by business and technology transformation. It's a lean, agile model at scale, but it's very much DevOps. It's a DevOps model. So I'm going to talk to you about that sort of DevOps Mai Tai angle in this. Why? What's the thing with working together as one? Well, Vodafone has been, and in many respects still is, a very traditional organization. We have wholesale and infrastructure. That's a business unit with a director. We have enterprise. We have consumer. We have it's called experience and commercial. So it's like the product guys. We have IT. We have finance. right? Very traditional model. And in a traditional model like that, Conway's law always wins. Doesn't matter what you design on paper, Conway's law wins. Conway's law says that whatever the organizational structure is, that's what your system is going to end up looking like. So what we need to break is the model where we have systems that represent the org structure. In other words, we need people, everyone, to work together. And how do you do that? Well, you put them together in teams so that they don't really have an alternative. And that's in a nutshell, that's what our model looks like. Here's our take on DevOps. It's not something that, I mean, none of that would be new for you, but here's how we cast it. Because remember, a part of this is not what are we going to do in IT. The IT side of it's actually relatively easy. The very hard thing, the much harder thing to do is to bring this thinking and to get this agreement and this common view into the whole business. And a business which in many respects is not used to an approach like that. A business that is in many respects quite traditional. So how do we have the conversation? If we talk about DevOps, what does it mean? So we ended up articulating sort of, for folks to hopefully easily consume the following model. We're saying that the question is always, what does it look like? Like, what do you mean? What are you talking about? So this is what it means. It's about having small, autonomous, cross-functional teams focused on a well-defined scope, which is the product, notion of product, as opposed to the thing traditionally we would have called a product, like super Wi-Fi, broadband, or all-you-can-eat mobile or whatever. We're not talking about that product. So a well-defined scope, aka product, and that team owns the complete life cycle of their product. That for us is, in a nutshell, what DevOps is. Let's drill into that. What does it mean? Well, small means small, right? So 8 to 12 people, so you can, 2 pizzas, the old 2 pizza thing, right? No, nothing new there. The point though is that there are many teams that are 30 and 40 and 50 and 100. And so that's not going to work. That's like the concept that we're trying to talk about here with the business, with the wider business and stakeholders, is that we're actually talking about small things. We need to make it quite small. It's autonomous and cross-functional. What does that mean? It means in these teams, they have everyone and everything they need to get things done without depending on anyone else. And that's a very tall order. I'm going to touch on that quite a few times again today. But what we want to be able to get is teams that are autonomous. They can do whatever they want, whenever they want, and they can do it because everything they need is in that team. Product, what's the product about? A product is the thing of value. It's an abstract concept. There are many ways to design a model like this. You can come from many angles. The angle we chose is value. And it's not, I'm not saying it's the right way to do it, it's just one of many, but like after lots of deliberation and thinking, we ended up saying, let's design ourselves alongside the seam of value. And so the product is the thing of value that these different teams produce and manage. But of course that then opens the discussion to what is the value? What does value mean? If there's a team here and they reckon they have a thing of value, what does that actually mean? How do you measure value? Who is it valuable to? Who's the customer of this? Right? Who's going to pay this team to be there and to do this thing that they're producing for someone else, whether it be for an end customer or for an internal customer? The other thing is then, how do we improve the productivity of it? Around evolving that product over time. It can be an actual product, but it can also be an internal thing, a more conceptual sort of, piece of value add into the organization. And of course we have, I just say team. Team could mean anything. We have a tribe and squad and COE and chapter area and chapter model, matrix. So I'm not going to talk about all those things. I'm just saying team. So team could mean any of those things. Ownership is super important. I'm going to come back to ownership because we had many issues that we needed to solve, which I think is actually solved. But the whole thing about ownership is that we need to understand that a team is accountable for delivering value to customers. right? The product we spoke of before. And not just that, they are actually empowered to make the decisions that they need to make and to do whatever it is that they need to do. So it's not about who makes which decisions, it's about who's accountable for delivering that value. And if you stay true to that idea of ensuring that it's clear who owns the accountability for delivering the value, then everything becomes much easier. Not easy, but much easier to solve in terms of decision making, etc. So later on, I'll talk a little bit about ownership some more. But one of the things that people say, I don't think of that, is that a team owns something throughout. They don't hand anything over to anyone else. You build it, you own it. You make it, it's yours. You need to keep on producing it and improving it and managing it and fixing it and delivering value from it. And not just that, but you need to do it more and more productively and efficiently over time. So that is actually the challenge for a DevOps team. And then the complete life cycle, well, the complete life cycle means from a twinkle in someone's eye, through strategy and planning and budgeting and business case and delivering and operations and testing and fixing and everything. All the time, forever, that whole cycle. And that's where the name DevOps comes from, right? It's Dev and Ops, it's everything. So that's how we explain to the business what we're talking about, so they can, in their minds, form a picture of what is this monstrosity, what is this idea we're talking about. Now, there are some cultural elements here. So, for example, the model is to bring work to the team as opposed to bringing people into a project. That means we're turning around, we're making a 180-degree turn, we're going in the exact opposite direction of what Vodafone has been used to. Vodafone, many other organizations too, are used to the idea of a project. So you make a project and you get people into the project, right? This is the opposite. You have long-living, autonomous, self-sufficient teams, they know what they own. Initiatives that pertain to that capability or that piece of value gets broken up and it goes to the team. And the team is there, it's long-lived, it stays together. It doesn't fluctuate with fluctuating project demand. So you need long-lived teams, and for us that's an important thing. For some others it might not be. For us it's super important, because if you have a project funding model, then of course your issue is that at the end of the project it stops, right? And then people go away to wherever they were, or if it's a contractor or a third party or a partner or something, they go away. And then that breaks the ownership model. So again, it's the exact opposite of what we've been doing in the past. We need to be able to prioritize in real time. You can't have annual planning. You can't even have quarterly planning. You still do quarterly planning, of course, but you can't change stack. I mean, if you drive from here to home, you can't, do this with your steering wheel, only every so often, every time, somebody decides, okay, once a minute you're allowed to turn your steering wheel. No, you need to be able to do it all the time in real time. And so you need to be able to make, priority decisions and be nimble and pivot all the time in real time. There's clear accountability, and it's not about who's responsible for what as much as it is about who makes which decision. So in many organizations, and again, we're an example of those, decisions were made or used to be made top-down. Now, there is, of course, still top-down decision-making, of course, but there are many decisions that should not be made top-down, they should be made bottom-up. And that's what our DevOps model is. And that's one of the culture changes that we're implying with this model. Clear visibility. Now, all of this is very hard to sell, because people rightly want to know, oh, geez, if you're going to, in the old days, I had a project with a project manager and a project plan and a project update, right? And I knew where things were at. I knew you weren't going to make your timeframes, by the way, but still, at least I had something to go to, because the project manager would give me reports, right? How do I now know where we're at? You can't just have teams doing stuff and having great, lead time and great, velocity, etc. I want to know when my thing, this initiative that I'm interested in, I want to know when that's going to be done and what it's going to cost and when I get it. And that's not an unreasonable demand. And so the answer to that then is that into this DevOps model, you have to build a very clean, very good mechanism, which we don't have. Well, we have it, it's not perfect, so that people at any given time know what's going on. When am I going to get this thing I need? How does it work? How much is it costing, etc. I mentioned before that the key thing is to invest in value streams, and that's actually quite hard. I mean, the hardest thing is possibly to work out for a start what our value streams are. Right? Is it our departments? Is it our products? Is it our processes? What are they? And so that's one of the hard things. I don't think we got it perfect at all. I think our concept of value and value streams will evolve over time, and that's all right. We don't want to get a gold star from some industry association. We want to make something that works for us, and we know it will evolve over time. And then lastly, of course, automation and a consistent tool set. Without that stuff, I mean, you have no hope of achieving any of this. So that's sort of our take on DevOps. I mean, there's much more one could say, of course, but sort of in a nutshell, if an exec asked me, well, execs did ask, what does it look like? What are you talking about, etc. What, that's the sort of thing that we work through. All right, so what are we learning? I said to you that we're learning that some of the things we do are great, some of the things we did suck, and we changed them. Some others we still need to see, not sure yet. It looks like it might work. There are some areas that we think, oh, this doesn't quite work the way we thought it would, and so we really are in the middle of the journey. Now, this is not an exhaustive list, it's just a bunch of stuff that I thought might be interesting to some people. And so let me touch on some of them. So tooling, I don't want to say too much about tooling. I mean, you guys are the experts, clearly. This whole conference is about that, essentially. And rather than talking about the specific tools in this one versus that one, etc., there were some sort of high-level key learnings that we did have. One of them is that it doesn't matter which tool you pick, really. I mean, some tools are better than others, of course, but that's not the critical factor. The critical thing is to spend a lot of time designing the cycle. I drew it as if it's left to right. Of course, it circles back on itself. But across that life cycle or cycle, what are the tools we need to use when? And so now you can argue, well, hang on, if you're going to do that, then you are taking away some of the autonomy, because Team X might want to use this tool and Team Y might want to use a different tool. Fair enough. However, we only have X amount of budget, we only have X amount of people to support these tools, etc. And you cannot have a proliferation and a spread of every tool known to man. Because I can assure you, we probably had just about every DevOps tool known to man in our organization. And not just one of each, various versions of various of these things. It's just crazy. Now that is not manageable. If you're going to have a consistent system where value flows right through from the owner, from the shareholder, through to the exec, through to planning, through to strategy, etc., right through the other end into production, you cannot have a system where you have this fragmented, all over the place sort of situation. So we spent a lot of time designing a very clean model that we believe works. And, model being the tool sets that we use to support our DevOps journey. Now, of course, value needs to flow right through the system. The concept of flow is very important in lean and in agile and in DevOps and in common sense. And so it is important, therefore, that when you have these tools, that you integrate them. An item, any item, whether it be an epic or a story or a bug or an issue or a request or whatever thing, whichever noun you want to use, a noun that you want to monitor, tools have to be integrated from left to right and circling back on itself, right through the system, so you can see where a thing is. If a thing, I don't know, if an epic breaks up into features and features into stories, etc., you need to be able to follow these things as they flow through. And if you have different unintegrated tools, they might be fantastic tools on their own, but if they're not integrated, they're pretty useless. That was a learning. We learned we knew we were going to have to really focus on change management because, as I said, each team had their own version of DevOps and DevOps tooling and process and everything. So we knew that a good design and a clean rollout is not going to solve the problem. We need a whole lot of focus on change management. And we were wrong. We need even more focus on change management. So I guess we learned that it doesn't matter how much focus you put on the change management and communications, it's not enough. And so that was a big learning for us. I'm going to skip the last bit because I don't want to run out of time. I want to talk a little bit about ownership. Now, don't misinterpret this slide. This slide is something that it's a model we came up with before Maitahi came along. And the reason we came up with it is that there was a lack of ownership in many areas. Not in the way you might think, but in the way that the question was, well, there's this thing. Who needs to make that decision about this thing? System, right? So there's the system. Who decides that we're going to upgrade it or not? Who's responsible for the roadmap? Who is it that says, yes, that's the right one? Because remember, Vodafone having grown out of, Vodafone Group plus many acquisitions over the years, we don't have just one of every DevOps tool known to man in the past. We probably also have, we have quite a few OSS, BSS systems, not just one of each. And so who's to say that A is better than B? Or like, are we going to consolidate on A or on B? Or do we actually throw them both out and get C, right? Or should we upgrade this one and decommission that one, etc.? How does that work? And so there was a lot of, there was a large lack of maturity around ownership in general. And as we started working with all the various many stakeholders in the organization, sometimes 2 or 3 or 4 saying, I'm the owner of this thing. And sometimes nobody says, I'm the owner of this thing. We had to work out, well, hang on, what does ownership actually mean? And so we came up with what we think is a simple model. It's a very simple model. There's a lot of sophistication underneath that model, but simplistically speaking, we say, look, in our organization, I don't have a pointer, but at the top of the picture on the right, there are customers and end users. So they're the people for whose benefit we build all these things. So actual customers, people we sell mobile phones to, or internal teams using our systems. Now let's say that the systems and the things they interact with, for the purpose of this discussion, let's call those things business applications, right? Now a business application has to have a business owner, clearly, because the business is interested in it. But it also needs to have a technical owner. And those two go together. They're two sides of a coin. Two sides of a coin, right? But then there are other things in the organization that the business aren't interested in, right? So no one in the business, in other words, outside of IT, is going to say, oh, I want to be the business owner for integration platform, right? And so let's, for the purpose of this, call those things technology platform. Now, so a technology platform has to have a platform owner. Platform owner is different from a business owner and a technical owner. It's kind of the sum total of both, but there's some subtle differences as well. And then we have operations. And I mean, any organization has operations, and so that's all good. So that's a model that we implemented in the past. And now the challenge was, well, all of that is important, and everything needs to have ownership, right? And we've just solved the problem about the lack of ownership, but what do we do now with that in a DevOps world? And so, so there was some, I think, quite good work actually that we've done in that space in order to translate between that and a DevOps world where, to make a long story short, ownership sits with the team. Right? So in other words, all those role players there, business owner, technical owner, platform owner, operations, they all have to have, not representatives, but people accountable for those functions in the team. So broadly speaking, the ownership model still holds, but it all sits together in one team. And then there's a thing that goes with it that describes in detail what each of those roles do. So for example, clearly, obviously, the business decides priority of function A before function B, say. And clearly the technical owner decides, we're going to upgrade or not. That the common sense stuff, really. So that was very important. And translating that into a DevOps model, that was interesting, and I think we did some good work there. The point I'm trying to make here is that it's very important, whatever ownership model you have or come up with, that you have one. That's the key point. It doesn't matter what it is. It matters that there is one. Team topology. I think this is going to be my last slide, judging by time. That's all right. It's very hard to do what we said on that previous page about autonomous teams and a complex organization. Telcos are very complex. All organizations are complex, but telcos are really complex, especially ones that still have, via acquisitions, still have many legacy platforms in addition to their main platform. So it's not just one telco, it's 2 or 3 or 4 kind of living together under one brand. That's tough. And so when you design these teams, yes, you want them to be autonomous, but on the other side, you don't want 100 people in one team, right? And so what do? Well, the solution we came up with, and it's team topologies. There's no rocket science here. Team topologies is about defining 2 types of teams, roughly. So there's more, but essentially there's 2 types of teams. One type of team is focused on creating, on delivering value into value streams, right? Directly into a value stream. So they build features. They work directly with customers, embedded with a business. One team, business, IT, everyone, legal, everyone that should be together are together in that same one DevOps team. However, if you go through the stack of what these teams own, very quickly you find that 2 or 3 or 4 of these teams actually start overlapping because they all need, say, CRM or whatever thing, right? There's many of those big monolithic systems that we have. And then what do? And so we came up with a notion of value stream teams and platform teams. And the key thing with this is that platform teams, their customer is value stream teams. And that's how they define themselves. They define and measure the value. That's the product they provide. But the key thing is that they have to provide that as a service. Now we've done all of that, and it works fine. However, the one thing that we're still working very hard on is how do you actually provide all platforms really as a service? Now it takes time. We know in principle what we're going to do, how to provide anything as a service. Because if you don't have things as a service, you can't have DevOps. Well, you can't have successful DevOps. But that's one of the things we're working on, and that'll take us some time. Maybe my last point, I think, will be that perfection is not achievable, right? We work with many consultants and our own thinking, and we brought our own experiences and etc. And everybody has their version of how this should work. And we've all read all the books, and the consultants come with their, IP and their good practice. So that's all fine, right? That's good. It's important to know all that stuff and to be aware of it, etc. But then at the end of the day, it's got to become practical, and you got to build something that actually works. And I'm not saying throw the theory out the window. I'm saying don't worry if you break the rules, because you cannot make this successfully if you don't break some of the rules. So you need to decide: do you want autonomous teams? Or do you want something to work? And where do you set the balance between them? So that was one of the hardest things, and we're still doing that today, and we're still learning about how to optimize that. I think I will stop there. I seem to have about a minute, less than a minute left. I was going to talk to you about funding, my favorite topic. Funding, project funding, business cases, all that sort of stuff. What do you do? To make a long story short, we ended up not funding projects, but funding long-lived teams and measuring the value that they deliver via OKRs. Now, I can write a book about that. It's a book that you probably don't want to read because it'll be bloody boring. But so in a nutshell, that's one of the interesting things. I thank you for your time. I hope that was a little bit interesting, and I ran out of time. Thank you.